Okay. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? I don't want to shout into it. My name is Lentino. I am a senior product owner at Sandstorm Design, which is right here in Chicago. Today, I'm going to be talking a little bit about a Drupal redesign that we did to help some of the world's greatest minds. Just a little bit about me. I've been at Sandstorm about 4.5 years. I've been a website project manager for a little over 12. But my background is in theater. I'm an actor by training, so if you had told me when I graduated that I would be presenting at a tech conference, I probably would have done a spit take, but here we are. I want to do just a little bit about Sandstorm quickly. We are a creative technology agency. We work mostly with associations, global nonprofits, higher ed clients, and in healthcare, interdisciplinary. So we'll talk a little bit about some UX research. We'll talk about some strategy. Obviously, we also have a team of developers. You might have seen John, my colleague, speak yesterday. So apologies if this is a repeat, this slide. But today I'm going to be primarily focused on the strategy aspect of content and working in Drupal. I am not super technical, but I will try to answer any questions as best I can at the end. Want to give also a brief overview of some of the clients that we've worked with at Sandstorm for whom we have built Drupal websites. So this is just a quick snapshot of some of the folks that we've worked with. So today I want to give a quick project snapshot about the redesign project, talk a little bit about user research that we did and how that informed our content strategy, and then how we use information architecture just as that foundation for really good user experience, and then leveraging all of that as we're making choices about how we are building these sites in Drupal. So a little bit quickly about the Milken Institute. Milken is a global nonprofit, a think tank. Their work is centered around research and convening folks to help solve some of the world's most pressing challenges. We like to say at Sandstorm, we don't save babies, but a lot of our clients do. So we led a user-centered design project for them. They had an existing site in Drupal 10, and we were working with them to really help bring their brand to life and create some efficiencies in their Drupal workflow. So let's start with the research, or as I like to say, tell me how you really feel. This user research is just a great way to sort of level the playing field and reduce subjectivity. So a little bit about who we talked to, our project sponsors, so the main folks that we were engaging with over the course of the project, stakeholders across the organization, so multiple departments, multiple different programs, which meant lots of different viewpoints about what the priorities were for this website. Content editors, I will say over and over again, content editors are users. They are users of your website, and you have to consider them when you are working on your Drupal build. And then, of course, we got to talk one-on-one with some end users as well. So what we heard, everyone uses search. All of those folks we talked to, everyone uses it. But when we were talking to them about the experience that they had on the previous site, it was slow, some of the results were inconsistent, and what were labeled as advanced filters weren't exactly advanced, and they were hidden, so you had to be able to poke and find where they actually existed. The next thing we heard, please don't leave me stranded. Users that we interviewed generally fell into one of two categories. They either were browsers of the site, they were looking for a particular piece of research or a particular area that would support their work, or they were laser focused. It comes to my inbox, I read it. If it's not in my inbox, it does not exist. But there was a resounding agreement that finding or being delivered content of the same relevant topic was of the highest value to them. So we really wanted to make sure that we elevated that related content across the site, and we'll talk a little bit about where that pops up as we go more into the build. The other thing we also heard is that they relied on the credibility of the Institute's leaders and contributors, in Drupal speak, the authors of the content. So being able to easily access other work by those folks and by a recognized authority or a recognized name was really important to them. The other thing we heard is kind of, where do I look? There was a lot being promoted at once, especially on the homepage, so it was kind of hard to understand the intent of the Institute's messaging. Folks who were already familiar with the Milken Institute, knew there was valuable research, knew there were insights to be found on the site, but sometimes they would see a link to something on the page, and without any context around what it was really hard to figure out if that was actually going to be valuable to them or not. So the good news, there's a taxonomy for that. We knew that search was going to be a huge priority as we were working on this rebuild and transformation, and that the facets and filters that we used would need to be exposed, first of all, and effective in refining such a huge body of work that the Institute published, and in the way that users expected from what we heard. To handle the related content need, we knew that we would need specific and very descriptive taxonomy terms, and then clearly defined views to be able to support all of that. We also knew that users wanted to be able to find the newest research and reports as quickly as possible, in as few clicks as possible. But we also needed to honor what we heard from the stakeholders, was that they held pride and ownership over pieces of research that they produced, and they really wanted to be able to feature that on their own pages, but we couldn't just bury them there. We really needed to be able to surface it in multiple other places. And then finally, no dead ends. We really needed to make sure that we closed the loops between individual pieces of content and making sure that that relevant content, related content, was timely when a user landed on a particular area. So now, I want to talk a little bit about information architecture, or what I like to say is measure twice, migrate once. So at Sandstorm, we like using the yes and philosophy. If you're familiar with improv, Second City here in Chicago, they use yes and. There's never a no answer. It's yes, I accept it, and let me propose something that maybe goes another step further. So how did we satisfy the needs of how users wanted to find content and how the organization thought about or wanted to house its content? So the users told us, the inspiration sites showed us, the competitive analysis all confirmed that people want to be able to find their content either by topic, a topic that is relevant to them, or by type or format, because that's how they recall having seen it before, in as few clicks as possible. We also needed to make sure that events had a permanent home on the site. These are business critical conferences, high profile events where the Institute is convening lots of those greatest minds that we were talking about to engage with each other and help put those brains together to talk about some of these very pressing issues. And then we needed a place to communicate the Institute's focus areas and how they worked for people who wanted to engage not just with the content, but with the Institute itself. Yes?
At this point, did you define multiple audiences that you had in mind?
Yes, we definitely did. This is such a small snapshot of this, and I'm happy to get into that a little more, but we really landed on, based on what we heard in the research that we did for this project in particular, that the behaviors sort of fell into those two buckets, and that's kind of what helped drive a lot of the strategy that we implemented here. That's a great question. Thank you. Sorry to repeat it. It was about the audiences that we had identified at the top of the project. So how did we accomplish all of that in one navigation without duplicating anything, without hiding content, or overwhelming users with content in the navigation? First, we had to do an audit and take an inventory of everything. And sometimes when you start that point of the project, your face looks like this. I equate this phase of a project as to the big purge before you're about to move. First, you're wondering how on earth you amassed all this stuff. Why do I have 7 lemon juicers? No idea where they came from, no idea what I'm gonna do with them. And then it gets messy while you kind of figure out what stays, what goes, what gets donated, what gets deleted or thrown away. And in the end, everything is nicely labeled in boxes, put on the moving truck to go to the next house. So as part of that documentation, it wasn't just the list of all of the nodes. We looked at the existing content types, the taxonomies, paragraphs, media types, because some of the content was housed in media types, not content types. Surprise. But with that documentation, we were able to confirm with our project team and the subject matter experts what content was prioritized to stay on the new iteration of the site, understand which entities handled which content when we were looking at something on the front end, and then what the gaps were between the prior state and where we wanted to go, what we had set forth or would plan to set forth in our UX and UI design. And then we had to give it all a new home. So from that cleaned up list, once we confirmed what was staying, we were able to neatly organize all the published content into 2 kind of similar buckets that we knew would meet the end user's needs and how they expected to find content on the site in as few clicks as possible. We wanted to make sure that experts and the events kind of had their own home, given the value and the business critical nature of those elements. And then we created a new hierarchy for the pillars, or really the way that the Institute organizes themselves, for those folks who really wanted to understand who was there, how they were producing this content, etc. And then keeping a nice tidy utility navigation so we weren't overwhelming folks with too many things. And then we needed to give it a fresh coat of paint. So when we are considering how we want to design a navigation, we frequently ask, to mega menu or not to mega menu? In order to determine whether or not that's the correct fit, we like to think about how many levels deep is the sitemap? When you look at the spreadsheet, how many columns are we talking about here? How many sibling pages there are at level 2 and level 3? So general volume. And is that volume the same between your level 1 pages? So if I only have 2 pages under this drill down and 17 under this one, is that going to create a jarring experience for users? Probably, yes.
And does it all need to be in the menu?
That is a great question.
Could you repeat, please?
Yes, so does it all need to be in the menu? I feel like this is a whole other talk on itself. And we've definitely done it in different ways. In this case, the answer is pretty much yes. But instead of going the mega menu for this project, we wanted to focus on keeping the users super focused on a particular area to make sure that they could find what they were looking for. So, and also when you're giving them a sort of narrower option, you want to make sure that you give them an opportunity to find a way back if they clicked on something that maybe they weren't exactly finding what they needed and they needed to go one level up. So not a mega menu in this case, but I want to talk about that more over drinks maybe. So where did that lead us in the end? Drum roll please, Chad. Oh, is my video not? There we go. We ended up with a lovely navigation that lets me use the word bifurcated on a regular basis. So we divided our nav in half, essentially. On the left, we had a path for users to be able to find that content content by topics. These are nested term pages, so we weren't just leveraging views of the taxonomy terms. We actually created nodes that have views on them, but allows the users to see a little snippet about that particular grouping of content and see sibling terms if you're on sort of a lower level. And you can see here, we're keeping it very focused in one column. And then as you go down, so this is the side where we're talking a little bit more, showing more about the Institute itself, its different teams and different programs. And then we're always giving the users a way to get back. And there's a visual indicator, that caret on the side. Do I go another level deep? Or if I go to this page, is that sort of the end of the line for this section? If that makes sense. Okay, move on. Nope, move on. There we go. So once we had the structure and the bones of the site in terms of our information architecture, we need to talk about all the other builds, everything else we needed to make that magic happen. So again, this is more about the strategy of how we make decisions about how we're using Drupal content types and taxonomies, not as much about the technical side of things, but again, if there are questions, I will do my best to answer them. When we are starting to think about architecture strategy and a migration or a transformation, we like to abide by sort of 3 guiding principles. Keep what can be repurposed. We don't need to reinvent the wheel if we don't have to. Be selective with new content types. I'll go into that a little bit more in a second. And then be kind to your content admins. Again, they are users. We need to make sure that their experience on the site is good as well. So let's go ahead and start with taxonomy strategy. So if a site's been around for a while, you know that sometimes those vocabularies can become overwhelming and often duplicative. So without clear governance and strategy around how new vocabularies or new terms are created, it's really easy to end up with a large list of sort of loosely related or one-off terms that really only apply to maybe a couple of nodes on the site. So we started with the low-hanging fruit, remove those duplicates. We have terms that one of them is capitalized and one of them isn't, or one of them is singular and one of them is plural. Clean those out right away. Making sure that we're looking at similar vocabularies. Do they really need to be 2, or can we sort of compile these into one? Remove terms that are vague, that wouldn't really help the user understand what a piece of content is about. Update any other terms for accuracy. So if there's a term that related to a program that existed 5 years ago, we don't need it anymore. Let's get that out of the way. And then nesting. Nesting has become our best friend because it also allows you to provide some context around that particular topic that, that a piece of content might be tagged with. And then if you're in a little bit of a stalemate or still trying to make some decisions, you need an arbitrator, AI can help. If you start with a cleaned up list like we did, we were able to compare that to some of the SEO keyword research that we had done, compare like terms, see where there were similarities, and then plugged that into AI to kind of refine and see where we might be able to gain some traction in terms of search and where we might be able to pop those results up a little bit higher. Yes?
Can you give one example of a decision that the AI would have made in that case? Repeat one example.
Yeah, so an example of a decision that AI would have made in that case. So looking at the list of terms that we had created, comparing those to some of the SEO keywords, and the prompt was really driving more towards how do we come up with a clean list related to these particular areas of focus, that will help the results perform in search better. So what we ended up with was, instead of sort of a one-word term, there was something that was a little more descriptive, like a 2 or 3 word topic term that really reflected more of the thought leadership and insights maybe that were already being used or that we hadn't necessarily identified in that keyword research. So it allowed us to get to something that was a little more focused and a little more descriptive rather than something super general. In some cases we needed that sort of higher level, but as we were drilling down into those lower nested terms, it really gave us an opportunity to find some alternative phrasing that would be a little more specific without being too niche. I hope that answered your question. So the result, we ended up condensing 17 vocabularies from the previous site, 11 of which were unused, down to 6. Now that's not just a subtraction. That actually was a rework and more decisions made about how we were going to be displaying content on the new site. But again, it allowed us to accommodate that volume by nesting and give it some specificity, so it actually meant something to the users as they were looking for content on the site. So now the fun part. How do we make decisions about what these Drupal content types are actually going to look like? How are we going to make the content sing using some of what Drupal is best at? We start with the content types here. So when we're starting to take a look at what content types we have, what content types we need, based on our UI design, our goal is really to strike the balance between flexibility for our content admins and consistency. We don't want anything to go off the rails and look like it shouldn't belong on the website. The thing is, it doesn't always mean to use as few content types as possible. So when we started looking at this site, there were 6 content types on the site, not including events, which is its own thing and again would be like a whole other session. But 3 of those content types had 0 nodes on them. So really they were only making use of 3 content types and about 39 different paragraphs. So when we did that audit early on in the process, we're not just looking at how many pages do we have. It's really looking at those fields, where are we referencing other entities within the site, looking at those paragraph types and figuring out, does it make sense to keep it this way? Is this the way that's going to help our content admins understand how to put a brand new node in this content type quickly? And then making sure that we are able to accommodate the content that users are used to adding on the site now, but maybe in a more efficient way. So when we're migrating or transforming hundreds or even thousands of nodes, which I'm sure comes as no surprise, we lean on structured content to help the editors get timely content published really quickly. So these are nodes where you're publishing a lot in volume and multiple times a day or a week, but once they're up there, they're not changing all that often. And a lot of times these content types, or the content that they're using in this content type, is not necessarily the same format. It might not use all of the fields, but we know that we're going to need to interrelate it. So we used one content type here that was called just a very vanilla, an article node, but we really used the taxonomies that we had built out to drive everything and everywhere that it showed up. We also made really specific choices about the fields that we added on that article type to let it be the outline for the editors. I know that I'm going to need to add a title. I need a summary so that all of my teasers are consistent. Obviously, you need a body field to introduce things, and then the many different ways you can upload media items like PDFs and other images and things onto there. We don't want them to have to make too many choices when we really want the front end experience of those nodes to be consistent across them all. So here's a little map of what that article content type looks like on the front end of the site, and I'm going to pick up this microphone so I can walk around. And I apologize that it's a little teeny tiny, but this is what a report looks like on the front end of the site. We know that a lot of users are coming to the site looking for this type of content. So as we are making choices about what we want to include here, we need to look at what's going to give the user context about this particular piece of content, not just get them to download the PDF. So we start off at the top and spin around. So we start up at the top with our format terms. So it's hard to see up there, but that little eyebrow text says report. So depending on what type of content this is, it can be a report, a newsletter article, it could be an RFP, sometimes they post those. We're grounding the user in what type of content this is. Obviously we have the title, we have the date, those are fields, standard fields on the node. And then we have our topics. So a piece of content, this one has a lot, can be tagged with multiple topics. So we want to make sure that the user knows, okay, I can expect to read about these things as I delve deeper into not just the content on this page, but also all of the content that's housed in that report PDF. The other thing that we did, these topics are all clickable, so I can go and learn more if I want to read more about, I think one of these says financial markets. If I wanted to go see what else the Institute has published about financial markets, I can click on that and go see more content there. We obviously have media references, there's the report PDF, it can be tens and dozens of pages long. Our featured image, obviously a media reference. We have a field here for the body text, and then our lovely view. So as we were thinking about the types of related content we wanted to have on the site, something like this is really easy because we already know that we're tagging it with other topics. And so for this view, we said, okay, we want this to match content, other nodes of this article type on the highest number of related topic tags, and then by date. So if you have 2 other nodes that have 5 topics similar to the one that you're on, show me the most recent one first.
Question.
Yes.
And this diagram, would you give this actual thing like to the client, to the content editors?
We not necessarily in this format. We usually do it more in a Word document, more in sort of a handbook way. But yes. So when the question was, do we give this diagram that I'm showing on this slide here to the content editors? So typically we'll give it more in sort of a bullet point format so that they, as they're going through, they can reference, and it's easy for them to get to, through the table of contents or whatever. If they're like, man, I really need to figure out how to get this RFP on here, they can just click on that, and it gives them the list of what fields they can expect to see there. But they also will frequently also have the Figma file or the design to reference to, so they know what it's supposed to look like. Any other questions? How am I doing on time? I'm okay. All right, I just lost my notes. One moment. Okay. So the other thing that we leverage taxonomy for is, I like this microphone better, is for our menu position rules and for our alias patterns. So I talked a little bit about when we were looking at the video of the menu, this content hub. So again, that is powered by a number of term pages that show a view of items that are tagged with a specific format. So you can sort of see it here over on the right. If I drop down to Content Hub, I can go to a page that has a view of everything tagged with research and reports, or I can go to a page of items that are just tagged with reports, which are a child of research and reports, or I can go to research and data tools, again, a child of research and reports. And we use that to give this particular node, the one that we were just looking at on the earlier slide, we give it its alias pattern. So we start with, I know I'm in the Content Hub. My term level 1 is research and reports, which I can see here. My term level 2 is this is a report. It's a specific kind of research. And then I have my title. And we didn't just do that with this article node. The other thing that we heard in the research, which I forgot to mention earlier, is that the events and conferences that the Institute hosts, their sessions, their panels are almost all recorded. And that content was still living on the site, but we didn't want it just to be buried under a specific event page or event subpage, because what if the user doesn't remember which year it was? They put on similar events year over year. What if they don't remember which year it was? So we also ended up putting those event sessions, the recordings of those event sessions, in this Content Hub. So if you ended up landing on a detail page for that particular session, you would see the same alias pattern where it would say Content Hub, but then it would say event panels, and then it would say the event that it was, which year it was, and then you would see the title. So a lot of that helped drive this pattern as well, and then where it lives in the navigation. Questions on that? Okay.
Did you consider the length of the URL as like something you were concerned about, or?
The question was, is the length of the URL something that we considered? Yes. I'm gonna do a Sandstorm. Yes. And there are some times when how do I put this? So we want to use the alias pattern to help give the end user context of where that lives in the greater ecosystem of the site. And we know that the titles of some of the nodes can get lengthy. And sometimes you just say yes. There is no and. Sometimes you just say yes. Okay, this is where this is going to live, and less in terms of the URL, but and I think also Drupal does a good job of stripping out parts of the title that you may not need in the URL better than some other CMSs do. And there's also juice in that, right? There's juice in having those descriptive titles. So there are two sides to that coin, and we make choices that some of which we can control and some of which we just let be. And then occasionally you have the well, let's just do a vanity URL for this one because we want to, because we need to promote it elsewhere.
I've considered having a subtitle field, but I haven't done it.
Oh, a subtitle. That subtitle field is also a good solution there, and it also gives opportunity for even more lengthy words and things for folks to put in there. Yes.
And how many pieces of content do you have on this site?
Thousands and thousands. Sorry, the question was how many pieces of content are there on the site? So thousands and thousands are all powered by this one article node. And we ended up, so prior to the redesign, things like reports, which again, high value, lots of people looking for that type of content, were in the media library. They weren't even in a typical content type. So you can, of course, you can do a lot of that. You can manipulate what displays on a media entity, but we couldn't, we needed other ways to start displaying the content, because sometimes you'd have a report that would also have an executive summary. And then we found out, oh, and this one, there's a Spanish version that we need to link to. So putting it in a content type like this, where we could add those fields and not just slam HTML styled buttons into a WYSIWYG and really make it a little more structured, we migrated those report entities into this content type and said, okay, if this is a media entity called a report, put it in the article content and give it a format of report. So the other thing that we did here, I'm sorry, was there another part to that question?
Well, where I was going with that was, I like to keep things simple. I counsel some of my clients to have 5 main nav items. This must, I mean, and if this is all in your nav structure, OMG, that's
Yes.
quite complex.
It is absolutely a complex nav structure. It really is.
Yeah.
And it is supported by, I'm going to finish this and then I will get to it is supported by. So the way that we structured these different tags is a piece of content can only have one format, so we gave it a drop down. You can pick one. Topics, you can pick as many as you like, and we trained the content editors to pick the lowest level term that was applicable to the piece of content they were on. But we trained this topics area to remember all of the whole hierarchy. So it remembered the parent topics of the one that you chose, because, and you noticed on the prior screenshot, there were a lot of tags there. It's giving you that whole context, because let's say I land on a piece because I'm interested in private equity, and then I'm like, okay, well that's pretty specific. I want to look a little more, I want to find something that's a little broader. I can click on that topic tag that says financial markets and see more there as well. And then we also have a pillars taxonomy, and I could do a whole other session about the pillars, which is related to that lighter blue part of the navigation, which really more represented the institute itself, how it was structured, who is working on different programs in different departments. But what this allows us to do is I can say, all right, this report was sponsored by and published by the Emerging Technologies team. And then if I go over to that Emergency Technologies team on the other side of the nav, what am I going to see? All of the stuff that I've tagged with that. Okay, I'm going to go fast and get through this last little bit. So, click, keep going. So then when we have the nodes where you're not publishing a huge volume, you'll publish the node once, but it's going to get updated frequently because that team is publishing new content, or we had a new team member get added. Layout Builder is your best friend. For the most part. Again, we're trying to marry the flexibility that we know people are asking for all the time and keeping the UX principles that we established at the beginning of the project, keep that consistent. So we like to set a default layout in those cases because we want to make sure that there's a really easy sort of set it and forget it aspect to this, especially when you're pulling in related content, but give the content editors the flexibility that says, well, we want to feature this report at the top of the page, but we also need to talk about this event panel that some of our team members are giving. How do we do both of those things? And Layout Builder is the great answer there. So when the powers combine of fields and layout builder blocks and all the things, we come into this beautiful default layout. And in this case, we're really leveraging that nesting structure to do some pretty cool stuff. So at the top of this, and again, I apologize about the screenshots, but this is a long page. At the top of the page, above faster cures, which is a portfolio that produces a lot of content for the Institute, does a lot of research for the Institute, has a large team. Faster Cures lives under Milken Institute Health. So there's an eyebrow there that says Milken Institute Health with the icon that represents all of the content published by, or all of the information about Milken Institute Health. That lives on the page above this, but we pull it down onto this node because we know that Faster Cures is a child node of Milken Institute Health. We have an entity reference for the featured content that they want to put in the hero. So that includes, none of that is managed there. I just choose the one I want, and that's all I have to do. All of the information lives on that node, that report node, including the title, what it is, its topics, who authored it, etc. We have fields on this node where they can add some intro text. And then we introduce the children here. Now the interesting thing about this block is I don't pick any of the children. I say, I want to introduce the practice areas, which are children of Faster Cures. I say practice areas, I drop this block in, and these automatically show up. This background image doesn't live on this node, it lives on the pillar node. Because once I get down to one of these, which I can't read, I also have this background image that introduces its children. So instead of having to upload that 3 times, it lives on the highest level parent, and I reference it on all of the nodes below it. Again, we have a view here that if in that pillar taxonomy I've referenced Faster Cures, everything that is tagged with Faster Cures is going to show up there regardless of its topic or format. We have a block that allows them to drop in for a page where they do have a specific newsletter sign up. They can choose to use this or not. And a view of team members, again, powered by taxonomy. We have a Faster Cures team taxonomy, a person node that is tagged with that Faster Cures team taxonomy will automatically pop up here. Questions? And rush through the rest.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so you said this is the default template. Is this still like a flexible layout builder?
It is absolutely a flexible layout builder page. So sometimes what will happen is, okay, I want to feature this report because it's really important, it's getting a lot of good traffic, but if there's a, they do a Future of Health Summit. If there is a specific panel that Faster Cures wants to highlight at that upcoming summit, they can drop in a layout builder block here, here. They probably wouldn't want to do it down here, but they can just drop in that layout builder block in this layout. So it's not, and they can also remove things that are in the default layout too. It's just setting them up with that template, and then they can choose to add or remove as needed.
And so is that template like created in any way technically, or is it like you provided them with, well, here's what we suggest you do, and then it...
So the question was, is the template created technically? Yes. So we set the default, and I'm not going to get the terminology right, but we set up the default template for that content type I'm going to say the layout builder settings, which is not the right term, but that is something that the development team does. And then the content editors have sort of, again, that outline, and they can say, all right, yes, I'm going to fill out these fields are not applicable anymore, I can remove that, etc. But it at least gives them, like, this view will just show up. They don't need to think about adding it there. They don't need to choose what's here. It's just going to show up for them. So we're already setting them up for that no dead ends success before they even start putting content into this content type. And then all of that powers search as well. So we are on this site using search web components, thanks to mid-camp fan favorite, Kyle Einecker. So all of that taxonomy, all of those different terms that we're tagging things with also give us a really robust filter and facet system that users have gotten used to. And all of those term pages that we were talking about earlier use the same view. So we're setting up consistent patterns from the front end so that people understand, okay, I know what to do here. I want to look at only letters of support or policy briefs. And if I check that, I know that this list will filter down the way I want it to. Questions on that before I move on?
What's the back end of the search?
It's utilizing Solar. For this site, we're utilizing Solar. And then the search web components just helps tap into that and indexes the content in a way that, and we can control which fields and things that it is tapping into so that we're not getting random metadata that we don't we want to make sure isn't showing up in this search area.
There is a decoupled component to this particular search.
Thanks, John. My technical brain in the audience.
You want to say,
So
Kyle's here if you want to talk to him about it. It's pretty cool.
let me say that into the microphone too. There is a decoupled, what did you say?
It's like the decoupled search component to that page.
Yes, there is a decoupled search component to that page. Should show up there. Excellent. So, I'm out of time. Takeaways, hopefully from today, starting with research, always a good idea. Just helps, again, reduce subjectivity, making sure that you can use sort of the user wants, wishes, needs as your North Star for all of your UX, IA, UI, development strategy throughout the course of the process. Investing time in auditing and documentation is super helpful. It seems like a slog at the beginning, it does, but it will absolutely help you. I have absolutely, post-launch, gone back to some of that documentation to say, oh yeah, that's why we made that decision. Now I remember. Thinking about every page as a side door to your website. So when we talked about the alias patterns, and we didn't even talk about the breadcrumbs, but the breadcrumbs on a page, and then your active states in your menu, you really need to make sure that no matter how a user is getting to the site, either on purpose or accidentally, they can orient themselves to where they are within the greater ecosystem on that site. And then, Drupal is so powerful. There are so many choices to be made, but a huge number of choices, especially for your content editors, can be really overwhelming. So being intentional about the choices, like when layout builder is appropriate, when more structured content is appropriate, when you marry fields and layout builder together, is really, really important so that you can set the site up and your content editors up for success for a site that is both maintainable and scalable.
So how deep in taxonomy nesting did you go in your experience?
So the question was, how deep in the taxonomy nesting did we go? I think we went down to about level 4 or 5 for this site. Not every site is like that, but we did. I think we went down to a level 4 or 5 on this one. So it can get deep. And it also prevents creating duplicates for saying, well, I need one for, like in this case, one for health, one for finance, one for philanthropy. Then you're trying to kind of marry all those things together when you're trying to relate content to each other. And this just allows you to sort of tighten things up. And again, give it context to where it lives sort of in the larger ecosystem of those topics in particular. Yes?
And can you discuss any end user testing you did after the rebuild? Do you notice
the structure works for them and people can find what they're looking for with what you guys have designed.
So the question was if we've done any end user testing post-launch. We've not done any testing post-launch, but and I had a slide in here earlier about about some of the analytics, but the engagement rate went up 100% or 110% or something like that. So it was clear that not just the findability of things, but then also being able to keep them on that page and keeping them engaged with those other related content and things was really working well after the redesign. Any other questions before I go on to my last? Yes.
Did you, with all of the taxonomy driven everything, did you have issues with, or I guess I don't know if you can say, with content editors keeping up with that, or do you see that being a problem?
So the question was having content editors keep up with the different taxonomy. So because we are still engaged with the Milken Institute, we will often get questions about, okay, we think we want to add this term in here. What do you think about that? Generally speaking, because we really looped in the subject matter experts early in the conversation, we haven't had a lot of negotiation past that point, but they know that it's easy to say, okay, we are launching a new program. I need to make sure that I add it into the pillar terminology, and then that program is dealing with X, Y, and Z topics. We need to make sure that those topics live in that taxonomy. So I think what we've done well is we've trained them to say, like, nothing gets added unless there is a business case for it, because we are now publishing research in a new area, or the way that this program works has changed in some way. If you have other questions, come find me. I could talk about this for hours. Thank you very much. Here are some other places where Sandstorm is talking about Drupal. And if you would like a copy of the presentation, feel free to grab the QR code, and there's where you can find me. Thank you all so much. Really appreciate it.